Rick Barnes was joking on ball calls when he said he's putting in a new play. Anytime an opposing coach runs on the court, you have to call him out. You have to call a time. Anytime an opposing coach runs on the court to call a timeout, just run him over. Quote, you go run over him, you've got to hit them. That was in response to Colonel Sanders at Texas A&M running out on the court. Great vest, by the way. John, so what do you think of Rick Barnes's decision? If somebody runs out on the court, just Vescovi just elbows him right in the face.
Well, I appreciate Rick Barnes' sense of humor. I would recommend Fight Fire with Fire, have a player come off the bench as the opposing coach is doing. You have the last man on your bench should be designated as the hit man, and he takes out the opposing coach whenever he runs onto the floor.
Caleb, I know that Rick Barnes was somewhat joking, but seriously, you shouldn't be on the court, right?
So that was egregious that there was no technical foul called on Saturday. But I'm going to redirect my blame to Rick Barnes because I think he's focused on the wrong things. And I'm actually dead serious about this. We all agree, right? And John, I think you're with me on this, that of any major sport, college basketball has.
By the way, you love when Caleb says, I think you're with me on this, because you might not be. And it could be like, I don't know, World War II.
I'll get burned if you're not. Okay, wait. I'll get burned if you're not. But I know Dave is. John, I would assume you are, because most people I know are. Of all major sports, college basketball has far and away the worst officials, right? Like, it's not even close.
Yes.
Oh, I think basketball is harder to officiate, though. I think college football officiating has declined dramatically since in the time I've been watching it.
Okay, fair enough. But in general, I feel like college basketball officials are the most inconsistent officials in all of sports. They get things so wrong. So yeah, they should have called a tech on Saturday. My thing with Rick Barnes is this. This is another example of how he operates on principle, which is it should be a technical, and he doesn't operate within the way things are, which is the refs missed the call. You need to figure out how to not lose by 16 points because you're playing Zakai Ziegler 40 minutes in a game. My issue with Rick Barnes is he's so committed to principle that he's costing his team. If he were Nick Saban, if he were coaching college football and like Nick Saban, and then the game changed to go up tempo and Barnes didn't believe in going up tempo, he would not do what Saban did, which is go up tempo himself. He would stay playing the slow paced football that, would have had Nick Saban fall behind. If Barnes were against the designated hitter rule in baseball, he'd be the one stupid enough to not employ the designated hitter in the World Series because he's against it on principle. Like, this is my big issue with Rick Barnes. He's so focused on principle and how things should be that he's not operating within the parameters given, i.e. his philosophy that you should earn playing time. Okay, fine, but you need your starters to be fresh in the tournament. So your principle that these players on the bench haven't earned their playing time has Zakai Ziegler and Jonas Adu gassed now, and it's going to cost you in the tournament.
Well, John? My really only criticism of Rick Barnes is related to the postseason. You can't argue with about his regular season success. I think you have to, as a coach, if you have a good team, you have to prepare for the postseason and what it takes to get there and then flourish in the postseason. And I think I remember Bobby Knight, a coaching friend of mine this is years ago, talked to Bobby Knight and Gene Cady. Bobby Knight
just knocked the hell out of him.
Thanks, Dave. Bobby Knight was the coach at Indiana, of course. Gene Cady at Purdue. Both very successful coaches, but Bobby Knight's teams did well in the tournament. Gene Cady's teams never did. And my friend asked both coaches about their preparation for the postseason, the NCAA tournament. And Gene Cady says, well, we work out a little more, Knight says he cuts back on practice time for the tournament, and they just spend less time overall. So I think that's a criticism in general of Rick Barnes. People I think feel like his teams might run out of gas in the postseason, which kind of goes to Caleb's point. Are you playing guys too much? So yeah, I don't know, but it's hard to argue with Barnes what he's done. He's a great program builder. He's done that wherever he's been.
Well, John, a little bit of semantics here. John's saying you can't blame Rick Barnes for his in-season success, but if that leads Caleb to postseason failures because you shorten the bench and run guys too hard to get a good regular season record, that sounds about Butchish to me, like Butch Jones, make your program look better than it really is.
Guys, that's 2 Butch Jones references during this show.
It's a bare minimum.
He's
okay.
He seeps into your psyche, doesn't he?
He does, and into his own psyche because he's got multiple personalities because he's a sociopath.
And you want to remove that seepage from your psyche.
Yeah, I think Rick Barnes is a good guy, which is the opposite of Butch Jones. I also think he's smart, which is the opposite of Butch Jones. So there are 2 things there that I wouldn't say it's Butch Jones-esque. I think Rick Barnes, again, I think he has a philosophy and a principle. And you're right. Like you said, John, with Bobby Knight, he would lessen practices and things like that. Rick Barnes has this principle of don't do that. Rick Barnes, and by the way, I told Dave this the other day. If I have a 5-star recruit in, as a son, Rick Barnes is the guy I want him to play for. I know that Rick Barnes will develop my son to play for the NBA, but
teach him how to be a big postseason loser.
Oh my gosh!
I mean, I'm serious. He gets to the NBA playoffs, and his load management. It skipped the first round.
Well, he would in the NBA. They actually would load manage because they know that.
But in the playoffs, because he played for Rick Barnes.
Rick Barnes would teach him and develop him to become a great player. He develops players. Rick Barnes. I mean, Grant Williams is totally a Rick Barnes story. That's Rick Barnes just developing a player into an NBA prospect, a 3-star out of nowhere. I think he's a great developer of talent, and I respect it. And I think he has principles that I respect, and I think he cares about college basketball, and he has these principles on how things should be. But his rigid principles are, it helps him, John, building a program, but his unwillingness to sacrifice some of those philosophies is killing him in the postseason every year. That's why he's losing.
So why doesn't he say, when you get to an end of the season, all coaches, I would like to think, even Butch Jones would say, well, maybe not Butch or Jeremy Pruitt, but most coaches would say, okay, what could we do better? Why did the season end short of our goal? What didn't work out right? What can I do differently? Wouldn't you think Rick Barnes, being a good coach, wouldn't he think that? Wouldn't he think about that?
I think he knows what he could do better, but I think he so believes in what he teaches that I don't think he wants to sacrifice what he teaches. So for Barnes, if his thing was, what I could have done better was give some of these other guys on the bench more playing time to rest my starters, and that would have helped me in March. He may look back and say that, but then he would say, but I'm not going to do that because I believe in teaching these players that you earn playing time in practice. And that's where I think Barnes is.
I can go with that. I think Rick Barnes makes you a better person, perhaps, but at the same time, I wonder if there is a potential chemistry issue here, John. If some guys that are younger think they should be playing more, and you're supposed to earn it on the bench, or you're supposed to earn it in practice and not be on the bench. I get all that, but at some point, you say, "Hey, guys, you need the depth. I'm not horrible in practice. Can I get a shot, or are we just going to lose in the first round of the tournament?"
Oh, well, I guess you could go Travis Kelce on him.
Yeah, just bump it. Just knock that. Yeah.
What?
Dang.
What, the age?
What?
Look in the game, man.
Yeah. Hey, that's a drop. That's a good, clean recording. John saying what the H is as good as it gets.